I don't have anything like a sixth sense. I've never seen a ghost or even heard one. Still, there was one time, just once, back in middle school, when something truly terrifying happened to me. And now, I'd like to share that story with you. When I was 14, I lost my father. After that, my mother and I moved into her childhood home. My maternal grandfather had already passed away, so it became just the three of us: my grandmother, my mother, and me, living together. I couldn't shake the shock of losing my father, but I had no choice. I had to adjust to this new life right away. Of course, I felt uneasy, but maybe out of sympathy for my situation, the kids at my new school were very kind to me, especially a girl named Seiko. She went out of her way to befriend me. She let me share her textbooks and kept me company during breaks. Before long, we became best friends. Thanks to her, I gradually began opening up to the others around me, and after a couple of months, I could finally laugh, joke, and goof around with the rest of the class, just like any other kid. There was this beautiful girl in our class. Her name was Fumi. She was stylish, effortlessly feminine, and yet she had a quiet strength about her. I think that's what I admired most. To be honest, I really hoped we could become friends. I guess that kind of feeling shows, because without realizing it, I started acting warmer around her. Then one day, after a seat shuffle, we ended up in the same group, and slowly, we began to talk. When I found out she was being raised by a single mother, I felt an even deeper connection. Little by little, we grew closer. As for Fumi, her situation wasn't because of a death. From what I heard, her father had left, run off with another woman or something like that. When I found out she lived in a house full of women just like me, I remember thinking, truly, how glad I was to have become her friend. But that feeling didn't last. Not after I visited her house. I don't remember why I went to Fumi's house that day. Maybe it's just because it was so long ago. But more than that, I think it's because what I saw there left such a vivid mark on me. So vivid, the little details around it just blurred away. Seiko was there that day too. She'd never really liked Fumi, and honestly, it seemed like she didn't like that I was getting close to her either. Even so, I can't remember why she came with us that day. Anyway, after school, even though our houses were in completely opposite directions, Seiko and I ended up stopping by Fumi's place together for some reason. Fumi's house was, if I'm being honest, a small, noticeably old one-story home. The wooden walls were warped. There was hardly any yard, and the gap between her house and the one next door, it looked barely 2 feet wide. I was a little surprised, but then I remembered how worn down my grandmother's house was too, and figured maybe their finances were tight. That thought made me feel a little ashamed. When Fumi called out, "Mom!" a beautiful woman stepped out from the back, smiling warmly. She had a few visible wrinkles, but even so, she was striking. She bowed to Seiko and me, deeply. So deeply, in fact, that it felt almost too much. She was holding a towel and some clothes in her hands, probably just bringing in the laundry. "I'll bring you something to drink," she said brightly, maybe because it wasn't often her daughter had friends over. At least that's what I thought. Fumi had told me herself that she didn't usually invite people to her house, so I reminded myself not to be surprised if her room didn't feel particularly girly. I didn't want to feel superior about something like that. But when the door to her room opened, what I saw inside was something I never could have imagined. I've already mentioned that Fumi cared a lot about her appearance. And her room? It was exactly what you'd expect from someone like her. Light-colored curtains hung in the windows. A plush toy sat neatly on her desk. The whole space felt far more feminine than I'd imagined, except for one thing. In the corner of the room, something was standing there, staring at us. A mannequin. It was definitely a male mannequin. I can still remember exactly what it looked like. Its arms were folded into a W shape, giving it a slightly twisted look. It just didn't seem like a natural position for a human body, and it was staring straight at us. Like most mannequins, its face was perfectly sculpted, and maybe that's what made it worse. That empty, lifeless gaze somehow made it even more unsettling. The mannequin was wearing a bright red sweatshirt and a cap. Oddly enough, it looked nicer than anything her mom had been wearing earlier. Seiko and I just stood there frozen, staring at Fumi, but she didn't look the least bit surprised. She casually walked over and adjusted the angle of the cap on its head. Watching her do that, it made my skin crawl. "Cool, right?" she said, but her voice, it was totally flat, almost robotic, and somehow that lack of emotion made it even creepier. Just then, her mom walked in with a tray of tea and cake. She was smiling as she said, "Thank you for coming." It eased the tension in the room, if only a little. Maybe Seiko had been feeling just as awkward as I was. She reached out and began placing the plates on the low table. I reached out to help too, and that's when I noticed something strange. There were 4 plates. I paused for a second, wondering if her mom was going to eat with us, but instead, still smiling, she picked up one of the plates and placed it on Fumi's desk, right next to the mannequin. I started to feel like I walked into something I wasn't supposed to see. Cold sweat was soaking beneath my clothes, and it wouldn't stop. Fumi just kept staring at the tea she had placed beside the mannequin. From where I was sitting, all I could see was her hair. Then suddenly, she turned toward us and casually poked her cake with a fork, like nothing at all was out of the ordinary. Then she passed us the sugar bowl. I wanted to ask about the mannequin. They were treating it like a person, offering it tea, dressing it up, giving it the best hospitality. But neither Fumi nor her mother ever said a single word to it. I started wondering what they actually thought that thing was. They definitely weren't treating it like just a mannequin. But if they really believed there was a real person, wouldn't they be calling it him? Or that guy? Wouldn't they tell us who he was? But they didn't. That strange in-between attitude. Not quite a person, not quite an object, made my skin crawl. If I asked Fumi about the mannequin, what would she say? I had this feeling, no matter what her answer was, it would make me want to scream. There was just no way this was normal. I searched for something, anything to talk about. There was a bird cage sitting in the corner of the room. Anything would do, as long as it wasn't about the mannequin. If I could just see Fumi acting like her usual self at school, maybe then I'd feel okay again. You keep a bird? It's gone now. Oh, that's too bad. I didn't need it anymore. The way she said it, it was completely flat, not a trace of affection. That was when I really started wanting to leave. I want to go home. I want to go home. This place isn't right. If I stay here too long, something inside me might break. That's when Seiko suddenly stood up and said, "Where's the bathroom?" "It's just down the hall, right outside the room," Fumi replied. Seiko hurried out of the room, and honestly, in that moment, I was so furious with her. I could have cursed her for leaving me behind in a place like this. I kept my eyes down, unable to bear the silence between just the two of us. No matter what we talked about now, I knew there was no way to truly connect with Fumi anymore. It felt like ages before I heard her footsteps returning, but in reality it must have only been a few minutes. Then Seiko poked her head in and said, "Sorry, let's go." Her face was pale. She wouldn't even glance in Fumi's direction. "Welcome back," Fumi said. The way she said it, so off, so disconnected, it nearly made me faint. Seiko grabbed my arm and started tugging me toward the front door. But even then, I felt like we should at least say goodbye to her mom. I didn't have the courage to face her directly, but I was about to call out toward the back of the house. That's when I noticed it. The sliding door beyond Fumi's room. It was open. Just a little. Maybe 8 inches. "Excuse me, we're heading out now," I called out, barely getting the words out. And then, from that narrow gap, a woman's hand slid out, smooth and slow, and with a sharp smack, the door slammed shut. We bolted from Fumi's house like we were running for our lives. On the way home, we pedaled like mad. Seiko stayed ahead of me the entire time, like she just wanted to put as much distance as possible between herself and that place. We didn't say a single word. We just kept riding, until finally we were back on our usual route. Once we reached a spot that felt safe, we bought some drinks and gulped them down, trying to quench our thirst like our lives depended on it. "Don't hang out with her anymore," Seiko said. She didn't need to tell me twice. Seiko was still catching her breath when she finally spoke again. "That house is bad. Fumi is weird, but her mom, she's the real problem. There's something seriously..." "Her mom?" I asked. That's when Seiko told me what happened when she went to the bathroom. When Seiko stepped out of Fumi's room, She noticed the sliding door next to it was slightly open. Without thinking, she glanced inside as she passed and saw something she shouldn't have. Mannequin arms. 4 or 5 of them were scattered across the tatami floor, and right beside them, Fumi's mom was sitting on a floor cushion, licking one of the arms over and over again, like she couldn't stop herself. Seiko, shaking, went to use the bathroom. On her way back, she cautiously walked past the same spot. She glanced inside again and locked eyes with the woman. The cheerful smile from earlier was gone. Her eyes were wide open, hollow, lifeless. The mannequin arms had disappeared. In their place was a neatly folded stack of laundry, including a pair of men's underwear. "The mannequin," Seiko started to say, but immediately regretted it. Fumi's mom said nothing. She just smiled again, softly, sweetly, as if nothing had happened. And right after that, Seiko grabbed my hand and pulled me out of there. The whole thing was so disturbing that Seiko and I stopped talking to Fumi unless she spoke to us first. Bit by bit, we drifted apart. I thought about telling people what had happened, but I knew no one would believe us. Even if we talked to someone close to Fumi, they'd probably think we were just trying to push her away, especially since everyone already knew that Seiko and Fumi never really got along. I did try asking a few girls who'd been to her house quietly, without making a big deal out of it, but they all said the same thing. They'd never seen anything strange. That just made us look even worse. There was only one person, a boy in our class, who said he'd had a strange experience. He went to Fumi's house and rang the doorbell, but no one answered. He was pretty sure she knew he was coming, so he figured something must be wrong. Still, he decided to wait, thinking maybe she was in the back and didn't hear it. He reached for the front sliding door, but before touching it, he hesitantly called out toward the back of the house. "Excuse me, I'm the one who was supposed to meet with Fumi." The door wasn't locked. It slid open easily. He peeked inside. One of the interior sliding doors was open. He wasn't sure if it was the same room Seiko had seen, but he could see inside. In the dim light of early evening, a man in a yukata sat cross-legged, his back to the door. There was no sound, but it looked like he was watching the TV. The CRT screen flickered with a cold blue glow, lighting up the outline of his back. Not bright, but sharp enough to make you feel uneasy. My classmate called out to him again and again, but the man never turned around. He just sat there, completely still, unnaturally still, like time itself had stopped. Feeling creeped out, he quietly turned and went home. There wasn't supposed to be any man living in Fumi's house. Even if he was a relative or just a friend of her mom's. What was he doing there? Just sitting there, frozen, with his back to the TV. Could those boxes have belonged to him? Or maybe what my classmate saw wasn't a man at all. Maybe it was a mannequin. But then again, have you ever seen a mannequin sitting with its legs crossed in front of it? If one like that existed, then it had to be different from the mannequin in Fumi's room, which would mean there were more of them, more mannequins, hidden somewhere in that house. At that point, I just stopped thinking about it. It's been 14 years since then, and only now can I look back on it with a little more clarity. Sometimes, in places far from where it happened, I tell this story. But even now, I still don't know what we really saw. If Fumi and her family were trying to keep it a secret, I can understand why they'd show it to me. We were close. But why Seiko? Why would they let her see it too? No matter how many times I think about it, I can't find a satisfying answer. There's something else I still can't shake. I've never seen a mannequin with arms twisted like that, like a W. You couldn't even put clothes on it like that. And yet, that red outfit fit it perfectly, almost like it had dressed itself. That's everything I experienced.